Welcome back, my friends. We are here for another episode of the Whole Life Vitality Podcast with Lauren Whitehurst, and today we have Adam Brooks back with us.
Feeling wholly vital.
Are you?
Yeah, my life is
Oh my
wholly
gosh.
vital.
Stop it.
Yeah, it has been actually ever since I was on here the last time.
You know, that's because you were on here, I'm sure.
That's what I was
right?
thinking.
You
Yeah.
learned all the things.
I soaked up the vitality in the room.
Whoa.
Did you feel less vital after I left? Did I take like your life vitality?
Well, now I don't know. I probably have enough to share.
I was going to say it's probably replenishing.
Yeah. Like just, constant, like
It
steady
flows.
stream
It
in and
flows.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it flows.
It's part of the healing.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So today, Adam and I were just sitting here discussing,
Riffing.
and,
As one does.
And as we were talking, you mentioned something about our headphones. We're putting our headphones on, like, how's the volume? Do we need to turn up, turn it down?
The function of the inner ear.
Exactly. And you were saying, don't turn it up because...
Oh, not necessarily don't turn it up, but be aware that when you have long-term exposure to loud noises, the stapes bone in the middle ear separates from the tympanic membrane and actually dulls the sound coming in, which is why if you're exposed to loud sounds at like a concert or something, then when you leave, you have a hard time hearing. Not because you've done any kind of permanent hearing damage, but because that stapes bone has actually distanced itself from the tympanic membrane. Desensitized.
Desensitized.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So many things came to mind.
All the imagery.
As you were telling me about that before, and I was like, oh my gosh, will you please say that again for the podcast? Because I really want to talk about this. But one of the things I was thinking of was how we respond to being yelled at or to conflicts.
Yeah, like chronic conflict.
Exactly.
Because
chronic
an acute conflict, maybe you respond with fight or flight, but a chronic conflict, like chronic exposure to someone who is berating or difficult or negative or aggressive or what have you, you become desensitized to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, a concert that goes on for hours versus maybe like a 5 minutes of a loud song in the car.
Yeah.
Then your inner ear would respond differently.
So, like my kids, we had a really junky car one time, which is going to come to as a surprise to anyone who knows me. But in this particular car, when you turned the volume down, the volume would drastically shoot up. And so...
Hang on, it would go like crazy high before it would go low?
No, it just wouldn't go low. So like you touch the knob and it just like goes crazy loud.
Oh, that sounds painful.
It was. So Zoe's in the car with the kids. She starts it up and it's a little noisy. So she turns it down and it just shoots up. And the kids all like freak out and cover their ears.
Yes, that sounds awful.
And afterwards, Matthew says, it felt like it shot sound bullets through my body.
Oh,
and I thought that was
such a great visual.
a really accurate description of what acute sound exposure is.
Yeah.
And since life is fractal, everything is a bigger or smaller version of other things. Mm-hmm. The emotional correlation would be that when we have an acute exposure to somebody really brusque or negative or aggressive, it feels like they're shooting emotional bullets through us. Chronically, we become desensitized to it. Something about us just distances itself and we stop feeling it. But acutely,
not because you get better at receiving it or being around it, but because you put up walls or barriers or, cancel out parts of yourself
right.
that would maybe have felt that.
And if we draw the correlation even further, one of Zoe's favorite things to say for years has been that noise-induced hearing loss is implacable, which is to say that too much long-term chronic exposure to loud noises can actually permanently separate that stapes from the tympanic membrane and make it harder for you to hear things. I think that chronic exposure to things that make you distance yourself emotionally is also long-term damaging in the same way.
Yeah. So with your ear, is it possible to ever bring those back together after long-term damage?
So it's pulled away by a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's the stapedius muscle. And so you have to imagine if there's a muscle, there's a tympanic membrane and the stapes stays closed so that it can get lots of vibrations from it. Mm-hmm. And the stapedius muscle pulls it away. It takes time for that muscle to relax and pull back. It almost takes like rebuilding trust.
And that's what I was thinking. If you do have the ability to have those come back together, it's not all that different than maybe being raised in a toxic environment where you have trust issues with people that you love, and then learning how to function in a healthy relationship as an adult.
Yeah, starting to re-understand everything so that
Right.
you can set new boundaries, build new trust for yourself.
Yeah.
And
Because especially as a child, where you are very vulnerable, like an inner ear,
Yeah.
and don't really have any choice but to be in the situation, like your inner ear, then you don't really know how to handle it. And so you just put up those barriers. But at some point, it is safe to
yeah,
expose yourself emotionally to other things.
and beneficial too. I don't know about
Exactly.
you, but when I was about 12, I was told that I needed to be less angry, that my anger responses needed to be less profound. And so instead of modulating that anger, I just put it away.
I was told I should be less sad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, the emotions that were inconvenient for people around us,
Right.
we were told that they were not okay to have. And probably you the same way as I did. I just put it away and inadvertently put away a bunch of other emotions
Yeah.
with it that were attached to it. It took me probably 20 years to start getting it back out again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that, which is interesting because, anger is a secondary emotion.
is.
And so if you were feeling angry and I was feeling sad, it's possible we were just both sad.
Yeah, well, I'm sure sadness played a big role in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably took that same 20 years for me to feel like I could cry and
Yeah.
it was okay. And so, yeah, I think sadness probably got put away at the same
Goodness. So with the ear, time and trust and healing all needs to take place. But with relationships, with human contact, you'd have to get into a place where you felt
Sorry.
really safe.
time. ADHD brain just limp biscuited. No human contact.
That's
and if
right.
you watch your back, your life is on contract.
That's right.
Best bet is just stay away. It's just one of those days. You're going to have to bleep that.
I'm totally going to have to bleep that.
Yeah.
It's all right. We will. One thing that maybe our audience doesn't know about Adam and I is that our brain works. Our brain, you like how I just said one? We are one brain.
Lauren, we're
right.
the same brain. That is neat.
We both work in song lyrics
Oh,
quite often.
regularly.
Yes.
Yeah.
We actually got asked the other day if we had grown up in musical theater.
Oh, yeah. We were out karaokeing, and the DJ asked how often we went to hang out in musical theater bars, which apparently is a thing. I didn't know that was a
I
thing.
thought she was asking us if we had been experienced musical theater growing up, as in had been in plays and productions in high school and stuff. That's what I assumed.
I'm not going to, I don't want to brag or anything, but I think I played a Bearsley Jr. in a road show.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I had 3 words.
I think I did. I saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus when I was 6.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
That's your musical theater.
It was like a church talent show or something, I think, that our family did.
Yep.
You were too young to remember that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, bring it back around.
Bring it back around. So if we were going to then increase that safety for people to feel like if they've locked those emotions away, it's not safe to feel sad or to feel angry or really feel any of the feelings, then what would you say we would need to do to start bringing those back out?
It's a really good question. I was just thinking about it because, ADHD anticipation. I hear
Yep.
where you're going and I start thinking about my answer. But I think that step 1 is to try and remember back to a time when those emotions flowed freely. And
Do you remember?
Yeah, I can remember times when I was a lot more emotional. And
How old do you think you were?
it was, I would say I was very emotionally active until around 11 or 12.
Okay.
And then it became, in that time, it was a really tumultuous time for me emotionally. So lots of tears and lots of anger and lots of euphoria. And
Would you say it was connected to puberty? Like things intensified and then you got told that you were too much?
yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard for me to know exactly, but I would say remembering back to a time when you felt more emotions, and then possibly determining what disappeared, and then if it were me, I would start thinking of ways that I could actively unpack those feelings. Like I could feel them. So like almost 10 years ago now, when I started trying to feel my feelings again, I tried to give myself space to be angry
Ah,
and to get angry again.
how is that?
It was scary for a lot of people around me because I'd been so restrained for a long time.
What did you do for that? Like, how did you give yourself space?
So, so I like with Zoe, I actively told her, I said, I want you to know this isn't long term. It's not going to be the end of our relationship. But if I get angry, I'm going to try burning hot and fast and letting it burn out.
Okay.
And she
See what that
said,
feels like.
yeah. And she said, that's kind of scary. And I said, yeah, it's a little scary for me too, because I've always heard that these are the bad emotions, the ones that you don't have.
Right.
And so because they were the bad emotions, I wasn't good at, I wasn't practiced at using them or handling them or understanding them or feeling them. And so I literally spent time actively allowing anger to flow out of me and mitigating damage while I did it because I didn't want to break stuff with it.
Right.
I didn't want to break relationships with my kids. I didn't want to break relationships with my friends or my wife.
Well, and you're saying anger, but you're like actually allowing that emotion to flow. Like you weren't hitting things or,
No.
physically breaking things.
No.
You just talking about breaking relationships or trust or whatever.
Undoing good relationships
Sure.
that I had built up over time. And
Yeah.
yeah. So no, I I don't think I have broken something out of anger since I kicked a hole in the wall in the Debbie house.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Also, do you remember the hole in the door?
Yeah, but I think
Was
that
that
was
Christopher?
somebody else. Yeah.
I think that was Christopher.
Yeah. Yeah, I
That's
don't think
funny.
that one was me.
Guys, I don't know that I've talked about this that much. We are siblings and
Big family.
we are also 2 of 9 siblings. And so we have
A lot of shared
a
stories.
lot of shared stories and a lot of really interesting dynamics that happen in large families.
So I think if we continue with the emotions and human body analogy, I would say that it's kind of like identifying a weak muscle,
Yeah.
something that has atrophied because it was too closely supported or held.
Yep.
And then beginning to specifically target it and exercise it. And it's uncomfortable at first.
I know you read to your children several times or maybe listened to Secret Garden.
Yeah.
Secret Garden. And in that book, the little boy is told from a young age that he's sick and that he just has to stay in bed and that he can't walk and he can't do these things. But
You think you can do these things, but you just can't, Nemo.
yes, that's the one, except for not,
Except for Colin.
except for Colin.
You think you can do these things, but you just can't, Colin. It's where the fish have this lovely garden under the sea.
That's
and
the one. And then the friends show up and teach them how to walk again and
Yes.
take them outside. Yeah, that would be a strange movie, guys. But what they did for him was show him what was possible.
Absolutely.
Again, took him outside, show him the outdoors, let him realize that he wasn't sick or wasn't as sick as he thought he was, because that's what makes it so terrifying to think about exposing ourselves to those emotions that are hidden or to relationships that we're afraid of or to stepping out and doing something new, is because we've never done it. And that's terrifying.
That kind of seems like the role of a mental health practitioner.
Yeah.
Someone who could say, it looks like this
Yeah.
is something you could do.
Yep.
And if you would like to try that, these are some steps you might take to try that. It looks like these are feelings you could unpack. And if you'd like to unpack them, these are books you could read. These are
Yeah.
exercises you could do. These are things you can do to start to feel those feelings and feel them in a safe or controlled or shaping way.
What was that Brene Brown book that you were just reading?
Oh.
Something about vulnerability, right?
So the book is all about vulnerability, but I believe
remember the name of it?
the book's name is Daring Greatly.
Oh, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
I would say that's a great book.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because you've read it or because you appreciate what I've told you about it?
No, because I've read it. So
Oh,
I've
okay.
read it and I've read some of Brene Brown's other books, but I'm just thinking as far as like trying to figure out if you potentially have something that you think you might want to unpack, either grab one of her books or she has a TED Talk, well, many TED Talks actually on YouTube
Yeah.
that you could start with and see if any of that starts hitting.
But beyond that, I mean, so when I first started going to the gym pretty consistently about 5 years ago, I sat down with a trainer and we had real in-depth conversations while I was working out with him too about which of my muscles were too small for my body,
Huh.
which of my muscles were atrophied, which of my muscles hadn't been worked enough. And then he focused my efforts specifically on those.
Yeah.
And in like manner, if you think that there's something emotionally stunted in you, why not just go to someone who can look at you and say, it seems like you're not good at facing conflict, or it
Yeah.
seems like you're not good at feeling anger or addressing sadness, and then let them point you in the direction of facing those feelings or being with them or sitting with them or
Yep.
feeling them. Because yeah, we could absolutely read a book and try and apply it to ourselves, but letting somebody from the outside direct us towards good health
Yep.
just makes sense.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. I was actually having this conversation with a client the other day about specifically interactions with other people and confrontations, quote unquote confrontations. And I had to explain to her a conversation is not necessarily a confrontation.
Right.
It can just be a conversation. But I don't know about for you, but for me, that was definitely something that I was afraid of.
You know, it's not uncommon. In fact, I feel like, at least on my side of TikTok, there are a lot of people who get on and talk about how it's a real life experience to have to talk themselves down and convince themselves that the email they're about to read isn't a pack of wolves chasing them,
Right.
that the fight
It's
or
not a
flight
personal
response they're
attack.
feeling isn't necessary.
Yeah.
Because the anxiety responses that we have, they get triggered, and if we're not careful to shape them, then they can build into a feedback loop that makes conversations feel very confrontational.
Yeah. So if you can't reach out to a therapist, if you don't have that resource available to you, that's maybe part of the reason why I was mentioning grab a book or
You know,
a podcast or, a TED Talk.
along those lines, Brene Brown was talking in that book a lot about vulnerability and how real relationships start at vulnerability. Maybe the very first challenge is to open up a little bit about what you're thinking, what you're feeling with someone that you feel close to,
Yep.
and be vulnerable and see if they're interested in being vulnerable back.
Yep.
Because let's just say, for instance, we as a human community decide all at once that we're going to be a little bit more vulnerable with each other, share a little bit of what we really feel, share a little bit of what we really think. I think it could go a long ways to improving the world.
I completely agree. Yeah. If we all actually were open to love each other.
Love, understand, talk to, tolerate,
Yep.
whatever the feeling is, if we can open up just a little bit more, be just a little bit more vulnerable, and especially with people closest to us, I think that's beneficial.
Yeah.
And it could be the key to figuring out what's stuck in us that could be better.
I meet a lot of people who say that they don't have good friends. They don't have people that they're close to in their lives. And I really, really feel for those people because I know the value of really amazing, great friendships.
I wonder about this, and I apologize if I'm cutting
Nope,
you off. We
go
can
ahead.
come back around to it. But I've seen people who seem like when they sit down to talk to somebody, they are so open and so vulnerable, I guess is the word that I'm overusing. We're going to end up with the word not meaning anything here in a minute, but it seems like when they sit down to talk to someone, there's an immediate connection with almost every person I see them talk to, right? Like they could be best friends with every person they sit down with or they talk to or they meet in passing. And
The people who go into relationships completely open.
yeah, and it makes me wonder if I feel like I don't have enough friends, maybe it's a consequence of my own closing off to protect myself at a prior date.
That is literally what I was going to say.
Oh, that's where you were headed.
You just completely read my mind because I know for myself in the past, I have overwhelmed people because they're like, I didn't know we were this close. Why are you telling me this?
Oh,
And I'm like, because it's like planting a seed, putting something out there, opening that door a little more for someone to see, are you going to step in? What kind of friend are we? Like, are you going to step in and we can be in this space together, or does this make you uncomfortable? And honestly, I'm okay with either way.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're just trying it out.
Yeah.
Just seeing who you are with them and what you have together.
Exactly. But even Zoe, your wife, my bestie, she tells these funny stories about when she and I were getting close. And she's like, you just kept telling me these things. And I was like, wow, that's like really intimate. Like those are like details about your life. Like, I can't believe she's telling me these things. And I was like, I'm just giving you opportunities to get close, like letting you know that that space is open if you want to step in for us to be closer friends.
No, I think it's the Michael Scott method, right? You only tell things like this to a really good friend. Ergo,
You're a
tell
really
them
good
to
friend.
someone and they are your really good friend.
There you go. See? Okay, so The Office, if you haven't watched The Office, hilarious. And Michael Scott is just unbelievably cringy, right?
Oh, it's his whole character.
Unbelievably cringy. And I will tell you, I relate so hard to him. So hard. I'm like, I never thought of myself as super cringy, but then I'm like, I got a little Michael like hidden deep in my heart,
That's what she said.
That's what she said. Exactly. So,
all right. Is there a point at which you think someone could be too open and too vulnerable? And if there is, how would someone know? Because we've been giving advice as if everyone was as closed off as I am, and the benefit for them would be to open up. What if there's somebody on the opposite end of that spectrum, and what they really need is to pull back a little bit and protect themselves because they've put themselves out there too much and they've hurt themselves too often? How would they know, and what would they do?
I think it's the same type of like dropping little things and putting out feelers, because I've definitely been burned in that way as well, where I was so unguarded and so vulnerable that I just got crushed so many times. I tell you, I've been hurt more by friendships and those type of relationships than I ever have in romantic relationships. And I think it's just taking personal responsibility for your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being
As an adult.
and
what we
allowing
do.
other people to do the same, which we've talked about a lot. But when you do that, then you realize, okay, I'm going to put this out there. And if it's not received, maybe this person just doesn't have the capacity to receive it. And that's okay. Because if they don't have the capacity for it, then maybe somebody else will. Or maybe this is something that is so heavy that I need to seek professional counseling, which is also totally fine.
That's a fascinating point. So I'm sitting here listening to you and thinking about how presenting the opportunity of friendship to somebody is kind of like bringing a dish to a potluck.
Yep.
Where you're not really sure who's going to enjoy it.
Yep.
And you're not really sure who you're going to match up with and be comfortable with and have a great connection with. And and then you said, maybe you need professional counseling. And I thought, oh, it's like a cooking lesson.
Maybe you need a cooking lesson.
Maybe if what you're bringing to the potluck isn't any good, you reshape a little bit.
Yep.
You change something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because maybe you are a little bit brash. Maybe you are a little bit cringy. And you know what? There's somebody out there for everybody, right?
Yeah. Eventually you could find somebody you connect with. But interestingly, I feel like sometimes there's a disconnect between who you think would be a good friend and who you're well matched to as a good friend.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Because I can afford low budget friends.
Yeah.
And I think for a long time, I thought that having somebody in my life who I refer to as a low budget friend, somebody who doesn't take a lot of emotional input, somebody who doesn't take a whole lot of support and buoying up, I thought that having someone in my life like that wouldn't be worthwhile. And now I recognize I'm not very good at giving a whole lot of emotional support to people around me. The people who I can afford to spend time with and be involved with are people who mostly stand on their own 2 feet and we can be in each other's lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they are also taking personal responsibility for their physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Right.
Which is great. Because when you can have a friendship that runs side by side and you can be there for someone and they can be there for you, but you're not feeling responsible for all of their needs, I really think that's what makes a healthy friendship.
Yeah, I can see that.
So if you are in that spot where you have blocked it all away, where you have been so desensitized because you have dealt with this discomfort for a long period of time, or maybe you were raised that way, then the way to start maybe experiencing some of that healing would be to, like we said, maybe a podcast or a book, or talk to a friend, or get into therapy, or maybe even just start journaling. And like,
Ooh, journaling is powerful.
where do I feel like I'm holding back right now? Where do I feel like when those feelings are coming up and I feel them a little bit, do they feel scary? And follow that train.
And can you sit with it for just a moment?
Right. What felt scary about that feeling coming up? And when was the first time that you felt that scary?
I think about when my leg came out of a cast and it felt scary to put weight on it because the muscles were weak.
Right.
And I was just sure that if I stepped on it, I was going to, like, if I put weight on that right leg, something was going to break, or something was going to snap, or something was going to be damaged from using it. But eventually, over time, it healed and I got better and I didn't limp anymore. And now I have a normal leg like everybody else.
Look at that. It works so well.
It's perfect. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
When we have damaged emotions because of acute or chronic exposure to something damaging, it's scary at first to rely on them, to put weight on them, to feel them.
Right.
And
is this going to hold me? Am I going to break if I try this?
And sometimes the most we can give them is just a little bit of exposure, just the slightest bit of weight, just sitting for a moment with the question of, why am I feeling this?
Right.
Maybe asking, if I do feel this, what would happen if I just stayed with it?
Yeah.
There's something called the Socratic questions. And Socratic questions lead you to ask things like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And now that I know that I'm feeling it, what can I do with it, or what do I want to do with it? And if what I'm afraid to do with it is feel it or sit with it, what would happen if I did? And if the worst should happen, would that be okay?
Yeah, just follow that train all the way to the end. I have done that so many times.
What is it? Ted says to be curious instead of judgmental. And I think that applies to our own feelings.
Oh my gosh, yes.
If we can be curious of our feelings and experience them, then we can start to reawaken.
Right. As you're journaling, as children, we learn things, the ads, my friend calls it, the happy, the glad, mad, sad, like the ads, right? And as you get older, then your concept of emotions grow. But as you sit down to journal this out, if you are like, well, I feel sad, if your concept of what you're feeling is still in that place of a 5 or 6 year old, that's okay. But maybe walk it back and say, maybe I haven't grown emotionally. Maybe that's when my trauma started.
What stopped me there?
Right. Why did I stop there? And if I go back to that place, can I talk through, well, what if I this? What if I that? Where will this go if I start to allow these feelings in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference. The range of emotions that I was able to feel when I started to open things up, and the ease with which I was able to feel them after I had practiced for a while, was life-changing, is life-changing. And it takes a lot of pressure off of me, because I don't have to actively be controlling my emotions all the time.
Right.
Because I'm more practiced in using them.
Yeah.
And so it's not a constant fight.
Just like your muscles don't get as sore when you go to the gym anymore.
Just like there's less pain and more power.
Pain. Yep. Less pain and more power. Dude, freaking awesome. And on that note...
Be powerful.
Seriously, give it a go. Journaling is such a great place to start. You can absolutely start there. Speaking of, we do have a whole life vitality journal that you can grab. I'll put it in the link below if you just need a reminder to be kind to yourself. It's
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Oh, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, follow. Thank you so much for showing up today. Make sure you tell your friends if this hit for you and you just want to share it with somebody that you love. Pass it on. We love hearing from you. If you have any questions or thoughts about things that you'd like to hear in the future, please let us know.
Reach out. We'll talk about it.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out today, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was awesome. We'll see you next time. Bye, friends.